The morning sunlight cut sharply through the blinds as Michael sat at his desk, staring at the glowing laptop screen, his chest tightening with disbelief. The bank account he had poured his entire life savings into showed zero. Michael whispered, "This has to be a mistake." His voice trembled as though the air itself rejected his words. He clicked refresh again and again, the same cold numbers staring back. His heart pounded like a drum in his ears. Emily walked into the room, sensing the heaviness in the air. Michael said, "They took everything." Emily froze, her face paling as she moved closer, her hand shaking as she placed it on his shoulder. The room felt suffocating, walls pressing inward, silence broken only by the frantic taps of his fingers on the keyboard. He said, "They won't give it back." Emily whispered, "What are we going to do?" Their home, once filled with laughter, now carried the weight of despair. Michael looked at the floor, his voice breaking, "This is the beginning of a nightmare I can't wake from." Michael sat in silence for what felt like hours, the laptop screen still taunting him with its cruel emptiness. He said, "They can't just erase a man's entire life." Emily pulled a chair closer, her eyes wet, whispering, "But what if they don't fix it?" The question cut deeper than the loss itself. His fists clenched, nails pressing into skin, the rage bubbling beneath helplessness. He remembered the years of work, the nights of sacrifice, the endless plans for their future, now gone in an instant. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, marking the death of each second they would never get back. Michael said, "I'll fight them. I won't let them bury me." Emily pressed her lips together, wanting to believe, but her silence betrayed the fear inside her. The room felt colder, shadows crawling over the walls, and the morning sun no longer seemed like hope. It felt like a cruel spotlight exposing their tragedy. The silence fractured when Michael's phone buzzed, flashing the bank's name across the screen. He grabbed it with trembling hands, pressing the speaker button. The calm voice on the other end delivered a blow sharper than steel. "We regret to inform you the funds are unavailable due to internal error." Michael's jaw tightened as he said, "Internal error? That's my life you're erasing." His voice cracked into the room like thunder. Emily pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting back sobs. The voice, mechanical and rehearsed, repeated policy and disclaimers, as though speaking to a stranger, not a man on the edge of ruin. Michael slammed his fist against the desk, shouting, "You will not get away with this." The line went dead, leaving only static and silence. Emily whispered, "They don't care, Michael." The weight of the words crushed the air, and all he could do was stare at the dead phone in his hand, fury and despair colliding within him. Michael paced the room like a trapped animal, every step heavy against the hardwood floor. He muttered, "Years of sweat, gone because of their greed." Emily followed his movements with her eyes, her voice breaking, "What about our daughter's college fund?" The words stabbed him deeper, reminding him that this disaster was not just his burden. He stopped, turning sharply, eyes wide with fire. He said, "They think they can bury me in bureaucracy, but I will drag them into the light." His reflection in the window showed a man already aged by betrayal, jaw set in steel resolve. Emily lowered her gaze, whispering, "I don't want to lose you to this fight." Michael clenched his fists and whispered, "They've already taken too much. I can't let them take my soul." Michael finally collapsed into his chair, body trembling under the weight of defeat. He said, "I trusted them with everything and they destroyed me." Emily knelt beside him, her hand gripping his arm as if holding him together. She whispered, "We'll find a way through this, we have to." He shook his head slowly, eyes empty, voice hoarse. "It's not just money, Emily. It's every dream we had, every plan we made." The sound of his words echoed against the walls like a confession of failure. For a moment, the house was silent again, but it was no longer just silence. It was grief thick enough to choke on. Michael raised his gaze toward the ceiling, whispering a prayer only half believed. "God, give me strength." Michael sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered in chaotic piles. Old pay stubs, mortgage agreements, and bills surrounded him like reminders of a crumbling life. He muttered, every sacrifice, every dollar, gone in an instant. Emily poured coffee into a chipped mug, her eyes swollen from restless hours. She whispered, "You've always found a way before." The words were fragile, carried on hope she barely felt. Michael rubbed his temples, memories flashing of long nights building savings from scratch. He slammed a paper on the table, his voice breaking. This was for our future. Emily sat across from him, her hand reaching out but stopping midway. Their silence screamed louder than their words, the room holding the weight of broken promises. The morning sun through the window looked cruelly bright, mocking their despair with its warmth. Michael whispered, "I don't know if I can fix this." The ticking clock on the wall gnawed at Michael's nerves as he scribbled numbers onto a pad. He whispered, "There has to be a way to fight back." Emily leaned forward, her voice quiet but sharp. "What if the law won't protect us?" His jaw clenched, fury flashing in his eyes. He said, "Then I'll expose them, make the world see what they've done." The fire in his words fought against the cracks in his voice. Emily shook her head slowly, whispering, "But what if they bury us deeper instead?" Michael dropped the pen, staring at his hands as though they had betrayed him. He said, "They think I'm powerless, but I won't let this end me." Silence lingered as their fear and determination collided. Later that afternoon, Michael sat in the living room, laptop balanced on his knees. He scrolled through endless articles about banking scandals, his eyes burning. He muttered, "They've done this before, and they got away with it." Emily sank into the sofa across from him, whispering, "So what makes you think they won't again?" Michael leaned closer to the screen, his voice cold, "Because this time it's me, and I won't stop until they're held accountable." The words hung heavy in the air, determination clashing with fear. Emily's shoulders sank, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose the man I love to this fight." Michael's eyes didn't leave the screen, but his jaw tightened and he whispered, "They already took our savings. They won't take me." Michael picked up the phone again, his voice steady despite the storm inside. He said, "I need to speak with a manager immediately." The bank's automated replies twisted the knife deeper, repeating cold messages about hold times. Emily watched him, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. He slammed his palm on the table, growling, "They think I'll just give up." Emily whispered, "They want you to break, Michael." His jaw tensed, and he leaned forward repeating, "I'm not going to break." The mechanical voice finally connected him to someone, but the words that came back were drenched in indifference. "There's nothing we can do at this time." He clenched his teeth, whispering to himself, "You will answer for this." As night fell, the house grew colder, shadows stretching long across the living room walls. Michael sat alone at the desk, head in his hands, whispering, "They've turned me into a ghost inside my own life." Emily entered quietly, placing a blanket over his shoulders. She whispered, "You're not alone. We'll fight together." Michael lifted his eyes to meet hers, exhaustion and fire colliding in his stare. He said, "They stole our future, but they won't steal my fight." Emily's lips curved into a faint, fragile smile, her hand resting over his. For the first time that day, hope flickered faintly, fragile but alive, in the silence between them. Michael sat in a sterile bank lobby, his hands clenched on his knees. He said, "I won't leave until they explain." The receptionist avoided his eyes, her polite smile a mask of indifference. Emily sat beside him, whispering, "This won't end here." The ticking of the clock on the wall grew louder with each passing second, pressing against Michael's patience. A manager finally appeared, clipboard in hand, voice dripping with rehearsed authority. "Sir, as we told you, there's nothing further we can provide." Michael rose, anger quivering in his tone. "This is theft dressed as policy." Emily tugged at his sleeve, urging calm, but his words carried across the room like shattered glass. He muttered, "They think I'll disappear. I'll make sure they regret underestimating me." The manager's words were sharp, each syllable meant to close the door on hope. Michael leaned forward, his voice rising. "You've ruined families with your negligence." The manager replied flatly, "Our terms are clear, sir." Emily whispered, "Michael, please." But Michael's fury surged past reason. He said, "I won't be silenced. If you won't fix this, I'll expose every one of your lies." The manager stiffened, hiding behind formality before walking away without another word. Silence fell heavy in the lobby, broken only by the distant sound of printers and phones. Emily pressed her hand against Michael's, whispering, "They're not listening, but someone will." He stared at the polished floor, anger simmering into determination. That evening, Michael sat hunched over his desk, articles about lawsuits and whistleblowers glowing across the screen. He whispered, "They bury the truth under paperwork, but someone must know more." Emily entered quietly, setting down a cup of tea beside him. She said, "You're pushing yourself too far." He rubbed his tired eyes, muttering, "If I stop, they win." His fingers scrolled past names, dates, and hidden scandals, every discovery fanning the fire inside him. Emily placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "You're not alone, remember that." He nodded faintly but kept his eyes locked on the screen, whispering to himself, "I'll find their cracks. I'll tear the mask off." The hum of the computer was the only sound in the room, blending with the weight of his obsession. Michael found himself walking down a dim street later that night, his breath fogging in the cool air. He whispered, "If I can't win inside their walls, I'll fight from the outside." Emily followed a step behind, saying, "Where are you going to start?" He turned, his expression etched in steel with the truth, and with anyone brave enough to speak it. The neon light of a closed storefront cast red and blue across his face as if foreshadowing conflict ahead. Emily's voice trembled, "This could destroy us." Michael replied, "It already has. The only thing left is to fight back." The empty street echoed with his resolve, every step a promise of war against forces larger than himself. Back home, Michael spread folders across the floor, scanning legal documents he had downloaded. He muttered, "Every word is designed to trap us." Emily knelt beside him, whispering, "Then find the words that free us." His eyes lifted to her, gratitude flickering before hardening back to resolve. He said, "I'll build my case one page at a time, and they won't see me coming." The night stretched into silence, their living room lit only by the scattered glow of lamplight. Emily leaned against his shoulder, whispering, "I'll stand with you, even when it gets harder." Michael looked at the papers with clenched fists, whispering, "They've declared war. Now it's my turn." Michael sat at his desk, fatigue carving lines across his face. He scrolled through a leaked report emailed by an anonymous source. His heart thudded as he read, "Unauthorized fund reallocations approved by senior management." He whispered, "They did this on purpose." Emily leaned against the doorway, her voice unsteady. "What is it?" He looked up, fire in his eyes, proof. "They stole from me, and from hundreds like me." Emily stepped closer, whispering, "Then this is bigger than us." The weight of the revelation pressed on them both, but Michael's voice carried a steel edge. "Now I have leverage." Michael printed the report, papers trembling in his hands. He said, "They engineered every step to drain accounts, covering it with policy." Emily whispered, "We can't hold this alone." He shook his head, whispering, "This isn't just my story anymore. This is corruption rotting from the top down." His voice carried fury laced with vindication. Emily placed a hand on his arm, saying, "If you go public, they'll try to destroy you." Michael's jaw tightened, determination hardening into stone. "Let them try. Truth is bigger than their walls." Michael met with David, an old friend and investigative journalist, in a dim cafe. David scanned the report, his brows furrowing. He said, "This could topple more than just a bank." Michael leaned in, whispering, "Then help me expose them." David exhaled slowly, muttering, "You're putting a target on your back." Michael replied, "They already aimed at me. I won't go down quietly." Emily sat silently beside Michael, her hand gripping her mug tightly. David finally said, "If this goes public, you'll be dragged into a storm, but storms cleanse." Michael nodded, whispering, "Then let it rain." Back home, Michael placed the report inside a locked drawer, staring at it as though it were dynamite. Emily whispered, "What if David betrays us?" He shook his head, saying, "He's not them. He wants truth as much as I do." Yet unease gnawed at him, shadows of betrayal flickering in his mind. "Ah," he whispered, "this paper could change everything." Emily replied, "Or it could end us." Their eyes met in silence, their marriage caught in the storm of secrets and trust. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. He whispered, "I've crossed a line. There's no going back." Emily wrapped her arms around him from behind, whispering, "Then we stand together." His eyes reflected the distant skyline, steel-hard resolve growing in the shadows. He said, "Tomorrow, the war begins." Silence filled the room, but it was no longer despair. It was the stillness before a storm. Michael stood at the courthouse steps, reporters crowding around, microphones flashing in his face. He said, "This bank stole from me and countless others. I refuse to be silent." His words rang like a war cry. Emily stood close, gripping his hand tightly. Cameras flashed, capturing every breath, every flicker of defiance in his eyes. A reporter shouted, "Aren't you afraid of losing?" Michael replied, "I already lost everything. Now I fight for justice." His voice carried across the chaos, shaking the silence of those who once doubted him. Inside the courtroom, Michael sat at the plaintiff's table, papers spread before him. Across the aisle, the bank's legal team whispered smugly. Emily leaned close, whispering, "You can do this." He nodded, his eyes unflinching. The judge entered, silence consuming the room. Michael rose, speaking firmly, "This is not about numbers. This is about lives destroyed by greed." The words echoed in the chamber, a raw plea sharpened with truth. The bank's lawyer smirked, muttering under his breath. Michael's glare met his, like a sword meeting a shield. Michael's hands gripped the podium as he presented the leaked documents. He said, "This is proof of deliberate theft hidden under policy." Gasps rippled through the room. The bank's attorney rose sharply, shouting objections. Michael countered, his voice steady as stone. "The truth doesn't bend to objections." Emily whispered under her breath, "You've got them." The judge studied the papers, eyes narrowing. Silence fell, a silence that weighed heavier than words. Michael's pulse raced, but his voice stayed firm. "This is justice clawing its way back." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras snapping. The judge banged the gavel, shouting for order. Michael's chest heaved, his eyes burning with adrenaline. He whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Emily squeezed his arm, whispering, "They can't silence the truth." Across the aisle, the bank's lawyer glared with venom, but Michael met his stare with calm defiance. The storm had broken, and Michael stood in its center, unshaken. As silence returned, the judge leaned forward, voice heavy with authority. "This evidence demands a full investigation." Michael closed his eyes briefly, whispering, "Finally." Emily's hand tightened over his, tears brimming. Reporters rushed to capture the moment, flashes illuminating the room like lightning. Michael whispered, "This is only the beginning." His words carried both triumph and warning, the kind of truth that cut deep and refused to be forgotten. The courthouse emptied, leaving Michael and Emily standing at the steps, exhaustion weighing heavy. Reporters scattered, chasing deadlines, but Michael's silence spoke louder than cameras. Emily whispered, "You did it." He shook his head slowly, saying, "I only opened the wound. Now comes the healing or the infection." His voice carried no triumph, only grim reality. The city lights flickered in the distance as night fell, and Michael's gaze lingered on the horizon. He whispered, "Justice takes time, and time is what they never gave me." Emily held his hand firmly, whispering, "Then we wait together." The world around them moved on, but for Michael, the battle still burned inside. Back home, Michael slumped into a chair, head tilted back as silence filled the room. Emily set down a pot of coffee, whispering, "You haven't slept in days." He muttered, Sleep is a luxury I can't afford, not when they're still out there. Emily knelt beside him, her voice trembling. But what about us? What about living? His jaw clenched, whispering, I can't rest until this is finished. The ticking of the clock pressed on the silence, marking time lost. Emily pressed her forehead against his shoulder, whispering, Don't lose yourself in their war. His eyes closed, torn between her plea and his obsession. Michael opened the morning paper, his hands trembling as he read headlines, Bank under investigation for fraud. Relief flickered across his face, but only briefly. Emily whispered, It's starting. He nodded, whispering, Yes, but starting doesn't mean ending. The article detailed victims rallying, lawsuits forming, and officials scrambling. Michael whispered, This isn't just my fight anymore. Emily placed her hand over his, whispering, Then let it be ours. His eyes lifted, tired but determined. Maybe this storm brings cleansing after all. The paper rustled softly, carrying the weight of justice finally stirring. Weeks passed, and Michael stood in a small community hall, surrounded by other victims. Their faces bore the same scars of betrayal. He said, We are not just numbers. We are lives stolen. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the crowd. Emily watched from the back, pride swelling in her chest as Michael's voice grew stronger. Together we forced them to face us. They built their empire on our backs, but we are the foundation, and we can bring it down. The room filled with applause, hope kindling in weary hearts. Late that night, Michael stood once again at the window, the city glowing far below. He whispered, I may never get back what I lost, but I'll make sure no one else suffers the same. Emily wrapped her arms around his waist, whispering, Then this was never for nothing. His eyes glistened, reflecting both loss and rebirth. He whispered, They tried to silence me. Instead they gave me a voice. The silence of the room carried their shared strength, fragile but unbroken. Michael sat across from David at the cafe again, exhaustion etched deep in his face. David said, You've stirred something bigger than either of us. Michael whispered, Good. That's how change begins. Emily sipped her tea quietly, her eyes fixed on Michael with quiet pride. The cafe buzzed with life around them, but for Michael, the world had narrowed to this moment, not of victory, but of survival and purpose. He whispered, They can strip me of wealth, but not my will. David leaned forward, whispering, Then you've already won. Michael stood outside the bank headquarters, staring up at its towering glass facade. He whispered, You don't own me anymore. Emily stood beside him, her hand slipping into his. Passers-by glanced curiously, unaware of the wall that had unfolded behind those walls. Michael's lips curled into a faint, defiant smile. You built a fortress of lies, but truth always finds cracks. Emily whispered, And you lit the spark. His reflection in the glass showed not a victim, but a fighter scarred yet unbroken. Back home, Michael tucked away the last of the court documents into a box. He whispered, This chapter is over. Emily leaned against the doorway, saying softly, But the story's just beginning. He smiled faintly, tired but lighter than before. I fought for survival, he said, but now I'll fight for living. The box slid under the desk, shadows swallowing the weight of months of struggle. Emily whispered, Then let's start again. Their eyes met, a silent promise of rebuilding from ashes. Michael sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, writing in a journal. His voice low, he whispered, They took my savings, but they gave me something more dangerous, a cause. Emily cooked quietly in the background, humming softly. Michael's words filled the room like quiet thunder. This fight was never about money. It was about dignity. He closed the journal gently, whispering, And dignity can never be stolen. The room felt lighter, as though the storm had finally broken. On the balcony at dusk, Michael gazed out at the horizon, the city glowing with the last light of day. Emily leaned against him, her voice soft. Does it feel over? He shook his head, whispering, It feels like the beginning. His hand slipped around her waist, pulling her close. The wind carried silence, heavy yet comforting. Michael whispered one final vow. They may take everything I own, but they'll never take who I am. The last light faded, leaving the world in shadow, but his resolve burned brighter than ever.